Hi guys. So I have Mohit Kapoor with me. He's the partner at Universal Legal, which operates out of Mumbai but kind of operates out of India as well. Mohit, I think it's also international, right? I read about your work in UK as well.
That's right. So we have a pan-India presence, and we also have a network partners across the world, about 65 countries across the world.
Yeah, which is why I felt like this was so interesting to bring you because AI laws are still developing in a lot of countries. Also, countries where AI laws are difficult, you are building a different product. The same company is building different things across the globe. So I just thought maybe because of your exposure across, this would be a really good chat. The second reason I wanted to bring you on chat is I've been a founder all my life, right? And you've been a founder. For me, the DNA, and for all the people I've been in around, which is entrepreneurs, the DNA is like just build it first. Build it, बाद में देख लेंगे जो भी होगा. And then during in club also, once something went wrong, I was scrambling. Yeah, I need a lawyer. I need to figure what is the real thing here. And so we learn by doing, and we make a lot of mistakes in that effort. So a lot of companies that have invested in AI space are on that gray zone where they're very excited to build stuff, get the market share first, but they've not thought about like some emotional aspects of what they're building, some philosophical aspects, some societal aspects of what they're building. So I thought this point where you and I can chat about this intersection, and it's also very interesting that I'll bring insights from the AI world, but you can tell me how they stand true in the legal world because I know nothing about law right now. Yeah. So I would kind of start with the fact that it is AI is a black box right now. So traditional models were not opaque. You could know when you broke down the network on why they are behaving the way they're behaving, which made them extremely safe and easy to control. After the LLMs have come in, it's basically a black box. Even the people who've created AI do not know why they spit out the answers they spit out. And the term for this in the AI world is called interpretability gap. So if you went back and told me why did the LLM write this, even the founders of OpenAI cannot for sure tell this. In this context, like what are your views? Because India does not have a law yet. We're still in the IT 2000 Act wala law. We have guidelines on AI, but in India, again, the guidelines are very fresh, they're very opaque. We don't know how to actually blend them in the entrepreneurial world. So I just wanted your views on this first.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, we're at a very nascent stage in terms of development of AI. And essentially, AI systems are developed when users add data to it. And therefore, there is no real originator in that sense. It's a combination of various originators, various people who put together content, and that builds on each other. And that's the base. That's the first data set that you have. So in a sense, it is something which is new to as a technology, as a system, and regulating anything that is new from a technological perspective, especially in today's world, is very challenging. So when you made a reference to the IT Act, which is almost now, well, over 25 years old, that came as a result of the internet and e-commerce and, various things that were coming up. People basically did business online in all aspects, and there were issues relating to privacy, confidentiality, essentially protecting you from data theft, any kind of online crime that would have been done in the real world, but it's now done online. So essentially, it was a response to that. Now, in terms of AI, it's still very evolving. So the government, as you know, has come out with guidelines last month,
Hmm.
which are basically an indicator as to what is going to be required and corresponding changes in law. Now, when it comes to creation of content, yeah, really the key is originality. So when you say I'm creating something, there has to be an original element to it. So you have an idea, I have an idea. But how we express the idea is where the originality comes. So when it comes to music or when it comes to a computer code or something that you've written or I've written, we would normally do it ourselves. But with AI, what's happening is that people are using an existing tool to
Hmm.
enhance an idea that they have. Now,
Hmm.
the question here, and this is a very subset of the various questions that you have, really is that how do you govern this? On the other hand, let's say I'm a bank and I have commissioned an AI product to use voice bots to market new products to, let's say, 100,000 of my clients, things like that. Again, that involves issues such as authenticating who I am when I call you as a bot to make sure that you are talking to an authorized sort of representative of the bank, or someone who has been, how do I have your data, first of all? How do I know who you are? On what basis have I filed you? So there are various issues come up now with AI. And the real concern is going to be, how are you going to regulate each of these? Is there going to be an overarching law?
Mm.
I think it's a bit premature for that. So, therefore, the guideline that has come out from the government has suggested a broad framework within which existing laws will be amended. So, for instance, the Indian Penal Code, which is now the BNS, will be amended to that extent. Copyright law will have to be amended to the extent of, expanding what is known as fair use.
Okay.
We'll come to that later. I just wanted to give you an overview of what the law is at the moment and what the proposals are.
But at the moment, there's no law, is what we're saying, right? There's only a guideline.
That's correct. There's only a guideline, there's only a roadmap to what it's going to be. And this is not only in India, it's across the world.
Yeah, I think which we'll come to. So there are three angles here. There is one is the generative AI, which is the copyright part. The second is the deep fake issue, which is also an element of it. And the third is the emotional AI. I think we can take each one by one and come to it. Is that okay as a sequence?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go on the emotional AI first because it's the most detrimental I feel to the society. Because in generative AI, it's still piece of art, writing would still kind of be a bit more laxed about it versus emotional AI, where there are now teen suicides and psychosis and everything being reported by talking to open source LLMs and closed source LLMs as well. So in this case, I was telling you about Character AI and Replica, and they're all kind of filing suits and fighting it out. Where the court in, I think, UK, also sorry, California, passed the law and a judgment which said that AI is not a speech. AI is a product, right? And this is what I was telling you, that the pre LLM era, you could user generated content is governed by Facebook, but the responsibility of what you post on Facebook relies on you. So if something went wrong with the post, it would come to your house to look for you. In which case, now when I talk to the LLMs or the chatbots, or let's say Chat GPT, Gemini, whatever they respond, whose responsibility according to you is?
Yeah. So, the California court judgment basically says that it is no longer the user responsibility because AI is a product in a sense, right? Now, the question about whether AI is a product or not, right, in the Indian context has not yet been examined in that sense. If you ask me, what do I think about it, right? It's a combination of a couple of things. One is that there's an existing data set out there on the basis of which LLM has developed into a product, which is constantly being fed with material. And then you have, let's say, an individual who uses that existing data set to get an answer or to a question or an opinion or a problem or a process or whatever. And that could result in, let's say, in this particular case, some kind of self harm
Hmm.
or harm to somebody else. How would I attribute blame to something of that sort? Right? I would also kind of agree with the view taken by the Californian court that there is some sense of responsibility to be attributed to the system that is providing this content, because it cannot just say that because we are collecting data given by various people, we are not the originator of that data. The
Hmm.
fact is, you're the administrator of that data. So it is incumbent on you to actually filter that data. So when you're feeding in something into an AI system, there should be filters that say that, this is something which is appropriate, this is something that is inappropriate, this is something that we will accept or not accept. And those filters have to be tuned into, let's say, cultural, social, socio-economic factors of countries. So India will have a completely different set of these
Hmm.
factors which will have to be looked at, and those filters will have to be applied. In the absence of filters, I believe that the AI system would be responsible.
AI system, you mean the developer
The
who's
developer
developing?
is responsible. That's
So
right.
there are two problems here. One is the black box problem, right? I'm
Right.
saying the developers who have developed it do not know why the system respond in a certain way. Now you can solve it using evals. So the word you used is filter. It's actually like some guardrails that come. There are companies that are coming up that only do evals, that make sure they're third party auditors who check everything in your system. It's called a red team, a black team. They all fight it out to see that it's being safe. Yet there are chances it does slip, because the way they've been trained is reward hacking. They've been trained to please someone. They've been trained for all of these things. So in this case, the first problem is black box problem. The second problem is all these companies like Character.AI, Replic, all of these companion apps are actually built on an underlying app which is from OpenAI or Google or Meta. Now, also again in this, who's responsible? Is Meta responsible because Meta made the AI, or is Character AI? I'm just using it as an example, of course. Is Character AI responsible because it used the APIs of Meta? So
Right.
these are the two problems.
So, attributing blame when there is a chain of contributors is always going to be difficult in this
Mm,
case. Now, let's say you're the end of the chain where, let's say, I'm using a system that is created by you, and you have relied on data sets from various other apps and systems, and you may or may not have had contracts with them, right? Now, the real key in when it comes to apportioning liability, especially in gray areas like this, is, do you first of all have a contract or you do not have a contract? At this point of time, most people have loosely worded contracts or contracts that don't cover everything, guardrails that are there in place but not effectively in place.
mm,
There's a lot of creation. The pace of creation is happening much quicker than the pace of regulation. That's really the key over here. So therefore, attributing blame in the absence of a contract would be that you would be to blame because I'm taking the product or the base of the product from you. So how you've covered yourself in your back end, that is something you should be concerned with. But over a period of time, I think there will have to be an evolution of what we call smart contracts that
mm,
come into play, where sequentially every person in the chain has
mm.
agreed to terms and conditions of the engagement with the other. And there is a certain, code or rather a certain regulation that is put into play as to what is acceptable, what is not, what is legal and lawful, what is not lawful. Where does responsibility lie when it comes to protecting individual data? Where does responsibility lie when it comes to manipulating data? Because there's a lot of data manipulation that happens.
Right.
It's an evolving situation. I think smart contracts would be the way forward. And in the absence of that, at this point of time, it would lie, the sort of all would rest with the person who is the ultimate service provider.
How are smart contracts different from the current terms and condition checkboxes that we do?
So current terms and conditions, let's say you visit a website and you usually have a terms and conditions, and you'll have to click and agree, what we call click and accept in legal parlance. There's only a bilateral contract between the user and the website in that sense,
Right.
or the website owner. Over here, there will be a chain of originators, a chain of service providers. Each is providing a service or contributing a certain product or a product creation to the other. So it will have to be done sequentially, where one will accept the terms, and let's say the base person who's providing data or providing content will have a terms and conditions. Now again, for it to work, it has to be uniform in all respects. It
Mm,
cannot just be that I have my own contract with, let's say, Meta has its own contract with somebody else, and in turn, so there has to be an architecture into place. But the click and accept form of this will mean that the process of the data cannot move forward without there being an acceptance between one party and the other party.
So in this example, if I as a user give my permission to Character.AI, I'm also kind of in the same contract understanding what Google will do if they are using Character.AI.
Absolutely. There'll be an acceptance of how you are dealing with my data, and there will be an acknowledgement that what I'm giving you is data submitted to you. But when I say data submission, I call it data surrender, because any data that we put up online is essentially being surrendered to the repository.
Right. And so this is a very, I would just like to take a detour on this part. So privacy, right? It's a myth now because let's say I wrote 25 blogs, and now when 2023 ChatGPT or any LLM was getting trained, it's already trained on my blog. I only get to know today that it might have been trained on my blog, right? Because that time the permissions to not let a bot crawl it and all didn't exist. So technically, like all of this data is being that I generated with my valuable hard work and I wrote these blogs is technically being taken for free right now. And that's the part which you told about copyright AI and the element of it. So are you seeing cases that are coming up with this situation?
Again, very nascent stage. The DPDP, the new law that's come out on data protection and digital privacy, is very new. It is basically based on the entire concept of informed consent and taking consent for surrender of data. Now, the fact is that when you are giving your data, now let's take the example in India of digital public goods, like let's say Aadhaar,
Hmm.
Digi Yatra, or the fast track immigration that is used for people who travel frequently. Now, you have voluntarily submitted your data to an organization who you believe is the government.
Hmm.
Now, the first question is it really the government, or is it a private body that's taking your data, processing your data? In which case, have you given consent to that private individual or organization to deal with your data? Or are you believing that it's the government and therefore you're surrendering it? You have the faith and confidence that it's covered, right? So as it stands today, I'm using the word surrender deliberately because I don't believe submission of data is a concept anymore. You surrender your data, and therefore, when you've given, let's say, biometrics, personal data, date of birth, travel history, which includes everything. So every time you enter an airport today, your travel history is logged, whether you
Hmm.
fly domestic or whether you fly internationally. Every time you use your Aadhaar or allow your Aadhaar to be authenticated by a bank, a credit card, all of those have to be done for a good reason, because that is required to confirm identity, to ensure that there is no impersonation or fraud of that sort. But are you protected in the larger scheme of things at this point of time? I think it's very difficult to hold accountability for misuse of data. And let's say your data has been misused by somebody. How would you pursue a claim? And against whom would you pursue the claim?
Hmm.
Question that I ask is actually more relevant than the first, because where has the breach occurred in the entire chain, right? And that's where the real challenges are going to lie, especially in today's sort of a multi-dimensional world where all your data is moving around across places you do not even know and imagine, and we have to surrender our data and agency because that's the only way one can function
Hmm.
realistically. You cannot function in the analog way of world anymore, where you decide that you're not going to share information about yourself. All your information is out, whether you do e-commerce shopping, whether you're transacting, doing any kind of transaction, any kind of social media, all your data is already out there. How do you hold an individual organization accountable? That's where the challenge is going to be. And who will you hold accountable? That's the second challenge at this point of time. Is the regulation equipped to deal with it? Not yet.
We've not even solved this problem, and the next problem about AI non-determinism is already coming up, right? Like that's also what worries me, because it's really too late, I feel. Hear me out. Like the ones that are making AI companion apps, I still tell them you have time, you can design this very judiciously, you can make, but the training of the LLMs with 20 billion, 50 billion parameters, which is your data, my data, everything we've written on the internet, is already done, right? You cannot go back and tell them. The maximum that can happen is Anthropic, which came and said, okay, all the authors whose book we've used will pay you guys some compensation. But that didn't give anyone a chance to say, I don't want my book to be used. It's retrospective. I don't know the legal term for it, but they've retrospectively just tried to uh, kind of be okay with the situation and given some money for it. But there must be an artist who will say, I'm not okay with it, and that's not going to be considered anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a reset. You're right when you say that it's maybe a little too late to put into place an architecture to check that, because the data sets are already out there and
Yeah.
you've already given your consent. So you can't roll it back and say, now I'm going to charge you for the consent that I already gave you. And if
Yeah.
there is a piece of work that, let's say, has been adapted or modified, in copyright law, we call, a modified work, something that's been worked on, like, let's say, a remix of a music song, or an adaptation of a story. How do you even trace the originality of this whole thing? That's where
Yeah.
the then how do you attribute commercial sort of benefit, or who is the originator, who is the creator? How do you actually attribute that this aspect of originality belongs to you originally, therefore you will be entitled to this amount of money? There are going to be all sorts of issues that are going to come up over time, now that we're in sort of in this domain.
Yeah, just to make peace with it, I've taken inspiration from this writer who said all written work and books are timeless and eternal and only have a single author approach. Because there's
Absolutely.
nothing else you can do at this point. I write very extensively on the internet, and obviously, like this bothered me at some point, but it was it was too much to bother about. Like there are so many then elements to bother about, and like my dad coming and telling me, "Don't record these videos tomorrow," because like the AI can run through the entire YouTube, right? And impersonate everyone that it wants to, hypothetically. And there are no guardrails yet. I've researched a bit, and so it is a very scary time to be alive, as well as very exciting time.
Yeah, it's a mix of, fear and excitement and opportunity. But I think whenever there is this kind of a transition in technology that happens, there's a lot more opportunity than any detriment that is there. But of course, there will always be challenges.
We are founders. We have to be eternally optimistic to
I have
thrive.
on everything. We've seen so many cycles of technology. I have personally.
Yes, for sure. Okay, I'm coming to the deep fake side of it. So there was this whole case of Anil Kapoor. His personality was used, his dialogues were used, and then obviously he won. There was not much compensation there, and they just said, sorry, we won't do it again.
So, okay, so let's say when it comes to celebrities, right, they have a public persona and they have a private persona. The public persona is, let's say, how the public perceives them basis the character that they have played in a film or the sport that they play, if it's cricket or if it's movie or whatever it is. And then there's the private persona, which is their personality rights and their rights of privacy and things like that. Now, when you take, let's say, pick up a photo of a celeb or a video of a celeb and make a deep fake out of it, you are violating not only their public persona rights but their private rights as well. And on that basis, you may have seen that some of the courts, and especially the Delhi High Court, has passed orders restraining the use of their images and creating deep fakes. But compensation is a different matter altogether. For
Hmm.
public figures, the real key is to stop this from happening because they have to set an example once. Otherwise, this will multiply, and then there will be, a sort of commercialization of their rights, which is actually not the intention. Because if they're not getting paid for a
Hmm.
performance or paid for an association or what we call, endorsement of a brand, association with a brand or with a product, there is basically a loss of revenue. There could be, some celebs now do not want to be associated with certain types of products or causes or things like that because all of them have their own, USP. They've built their own reputation, especially the established actors.
Hmm.
Some of them don't want to be associated, let's say, with a gaming site or with
Right.
an alcohol brand or things that are, vice driven or things like that. So you will violate that on a personal and as well as a public persona basis. And therefore, they will have no option but to go to court and, just like the other artists you mentioned have done now, file for an injunction and get that injunction on the basis of evidence that's produced. Sometimes the person who's created these deepfakes will be identifiable because you know who they are. And sometimes it could be anonymous because in today's world it can be done anonymously and kept online. So then they will apply to court for what is called a John Doe order. John Doe order basically is an order against the world at large to prevent people from doing something which they are aware of, but they can't identify who that person is. When they can identify, of course, then they will name the defendant and then go for that kind of action. There can also be criminal action that is taken. They can also file criminal proceedings, but then that's really not an end in itself. It's basically just a proceeding. But getting an injunction is an effective remedy for a celebrity in today's world.
Yeah, but I think again the damage is done by the time things. I mean, it's just a lesson for the next guy not to do it. So it may scare some people off, but like by
It's
that
a
time the
deterrent. Well, I would say that, you see, the thing is that managing intellectual property today, and is very challenging, especially when it's a personality. Because there's a lot of value in personalities and people who have spent months and years on developing a certain skill, it's an artist or a film star or a sports person or whatever it is. So therefore they have to then invest that time and money and effort in protecting their value and make
Hmm.
sure that it's not commercialized in a wrong way or in a way that they are not okay with.
Yeah, and there was this, but the element that is more confusing to me is like as a celebrity, if I've given you the permission to do it, then it's legal. You're saying then
No, no, it's not.
consent is
It's not a question of legal or illegal. It's a question of what I've contractually given you.
so that's what I'm saying. If there is consent, it's a legal contract.
Even consent today. So artist agreements today are very sophisticated and very detailed. Let's say an artist has commissioned that you can use my name, likeness, and my caricature and things like that for a particular work.
Hmm.
I've given it to you for this work only.
Hmm.
If you decide to expand it to other aspects or expand the scope of the permission, then I am within my rights as an artist to stop you from doing so.
Hmm.
I haven't given blanket consent. Because
which
all
is
consent that's given by artists, usually it is given for a particular project or a purpose or a particular piece of work or things like that. They don't normally give blanket permission.
yeah, so which happened in the case of Ranjana, the movie where the ending was altered, and then I don't know what happened finally to these
Yeah, I
works
mean
being.
alternate endings. It's not a new concept in, especially in Hollywood. It's very common for artists to have in their contracts clauses that allow for alternate endings as well. In
Hmm.
India, alternate endings are a very new concept, so to speak. It's more of, because the volume of content is so much. I think just if you were to add alternate endings to all the existing content itself, I don't know how much
Yeah.
of attention you'd have, but you'd need to have it in the contract as an artist that you can actually use my images and whatever it is, whatever you create using AI in that particular way. It has to be built into the contract.
Do you see a world where like different sectors in terms of like healthcare, defense, filmmaking, and different countries all will have different AI laws? Because healthcare and defense is very, you cannot reverse it. Like the stuff we're talking about is reversible at least.
Yeah. So the way I would look at it is there are some aspects which are very critical for national interest or for public health and safety. So for instance, defense or healthcare, I would
Hmm.
consider them to be highly regulated by governments. Now, whether governments come together on a common global platform and then have some kind of a common treaty or some kind of a common regulation, that is yet to be seen, because everyone's in their own phase of development. Everyone's looking at it as a very narrow kind of lens. You will require to do this and put sort of activities in two baskets. One basket which is dealing with issues that are of national interest, public health and safety,
Hmm.
and then those that are dealing with, let's say, e-commerce and other aspects of, sort of using AI for different purposes. For instance, creating art, creating music. Any kind of copyright issues will require changes to the Copyright Act, and then each country would have their own concern on what they consider to be national interest and not. So it's really subjective at this point of time. But will there be a common regulation? I don't imagine there will be. There will be some kind of a treaty between countries, that's for sure, over time.
Got it. But even the GDPR and all took so long. I mean, by the time it came, there was so much. Anyway, I know this is sounding repetitive, but the other part why law is getting it's difficult to do this. US is trying to put a AI policy in place, but then there's this whole lobby around you're going to stifle innovation and all of this, right? Which is why also there's delay in like the policy making. It's not just about wanting to do it. It's about what you're going to also give up, and it's in race with China, and China is not regulating a lot of things. So do you have thoughts on that as well?
So geopolitically, we're at a very interesting time. The whole global South order is sort of changing, and countries that had relevance earlier are losing relevance. Continents that had relevance earlier are losing relevance, and countries that never had the kind of positioning in the global order are changing.
Hmm.
Now, everyone is looking at their own situation across the world. So the US will look at it from the perspective of the lobbies that press them to do or not do certain things, and they have enough lobbies over there. I mean, they're full of all the tech companies in the world are based over there. China, I guess, would operate in their own very opaque way. No one knows what's really going on.
Hmm.
And of course, they have their own plan, agenda, strategy, and they can operate in their own, you know, it's a very different type of state, as you know what I mean. It's a different type of state which operates in its own way. It doesn't require to follow democratic consensus. So they will do what they have to do. So every country today is operating within its own compulsions, domestic issues, lobbies and boundaries, and geopolitically it's going to play out very differently over time, because AI is a massive tool. I mean, data is the new oil. It's been the new oil for many years. Data is power,
Hmm.
and therefore everyone will look at it from their own national interest and strategically. So it's not going to be harmonized coming together of nations in a
Yeah.
United Nations kind of way. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, and which is why my biggest problem is with AI sovereignty. Like with 1 billion people, I think India is the biggest market for ChatGPT. We have weekly users. I did a research paper on it, and they're highly dependent on ChatGPT now. Ton and ton of very private, vulnerable data resides in another country, not even in our own country, because cloud rules have not come on ChatGPT yet. Like you don't need on-premise on in-country cloud. So this kind of also worries me among other worries that I already told you.
See, where your data is housed, I mean, we have no idea. where our data is housed. We're using a certain software right now. Where is it being stored? We have I have no idea personally where it's being
Yeah,
stored, how it's
the
going to,
US, but yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, in the US, but the fact is, there is definitely a concern about data flow and data
yeah.
exchange, which is, I think, well beyond control at this point of time.
Yeah, and that's when I see news that US is going to scrutinize social media accounts of people who apply for the visa. I'm like, how do they have this access? And I'm like, of course I know how do they have that access, right? And so now the rule is whatever you say can be held against you, even on social media.
Absolutely. Your phone is listening to whatever you say. Your device is listening to whatever you say. All your data is captured. The algos that are built into social media will push products and services and things of interest to you basis what we talk about at all points of time. Our phone is recording almost everything that we do all through the day. It's with us 24/7.
Mm.
you know uh, it's incredible. I mean, people say, you're not paying for this product, it's great, so it should be great. But the fact is, when you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Yeah. Got it. And before I ask you, I mean, as someone in the legal, how do you see this? Like, there is one more thing in audit. What is the importance of audit in law when a conflict actually happens between an IT company or a provider like ChatGPT, let's say, or a Gemini, and the user? Because you can't audit these systems; they are very opaque.
They are very opaque. When you're trying to do an audit in a legal sense, and when you're talking about, let's say, there's been a data breach resulting in a consequential loss to somebody.
So this is still predictable. But when the teen was driven to do suicide, why did the AI say, "Okay, go sleep well tonight"?
Very difficult in the Indian context. Very difficult. I mean, suicide itself is criminalized in India, where
Yeah.
the person committing suicide is the accused, in a sense, if it's an attempted suicide. And if the person succeeds in committing suicide, then they look at attributing blame to individuals around that person. So will they go around asking all these sites and about whether or not they have contributed to what extent? It's going to be very hard to do that, because it's hard enough to attribute blame to an individual human being. How are you going to attribute blame to a system which is anonymous?
Yeah, that's when I always think if character AI and this whole case had happened in India, I sometimes try to visualize how this would have played out, and it's
Yeah.
very different,
Then,
right?
as time goes by, like when the IT Act came, I remember I had started my practice way back in '96, and the internet had just come into play at that point of time, and the IT Act came in 2000, 2001 too. Um, it contemplated for changes in law, consequential changes in law. Now, what's going to happen as and when AI develops, the regulation will have to start developing faster. So, the guideline that's come into play in November right now makes certain suggestions, but executing those follow up sort of amendments in law will have to be done. And it can either be done holistically, which is going to be very difficult in a country like India, or it will be done in a sequential way, reactive way. Whenever they find that there is something that needs to be regulated, they'll come up with something new. Like, for instance, you might be aware, under the IT Act, we have the intermediary rules, where intermediaries are required to handle data that is being collected on various sites, wherever you're handling personal data. And there are rules and responsibilities. So that's come in way back in 2013. But even then, it came almost 15 years after the advent of what we call the dot-com age, or the the internet age, in that sense. So I don't think we'll have the luxury of that kind of runway of time when it comes to AI. It will need to
Yeah.
be done sooner than later. And fortunately, Indian lawmakers, legislators, they're very, very progressive in terms of their ability to adapt to change, and also adapt from other jurisdictions, regulations that might come up in the EU and the US or wherever. So I'm quite sure it'll happen. The question is when.
Got it. And okay, so the concluding some questions or thoughts are on what kind of founders or people are now coming to you from the AI perspective for help? Like, is it reached that stage where they're coming for these black box problems, or we're still at a very early stage?
Across the board. So it is not any one particular type of AI founder. Across the board, AI founders are coming to us for various different things. It could be somebody who's setting up chatbots to optimize an existing base of customers. It could be someone coming to us to create something new and are looking at patenting the product or the process, things like that. So across the spectrum, it's like a whiteboard at the moment. Because the law is is not sort of crystallized on it, they're coming to lawyers such as myself who've been doing technology law as part of our practice for several years, and we can give them an entire, because we know the entire landscape of the legal system, and we've seen the entire transition from the brick and mortar stage to the internet stage and now the AI stage of the system, as to how to navigate, and what to look out for, and what are the risks that you need to look out for. How do you mitigate those risks? How do you plan for contracts? And where do you sort of, essentially, they come to us for risk mitigation for two things: risk mitigation and to protect their IP. And that's where we're quite effective at that. But at the moment, it's sort of a whiteboard.
The risk mitigation part also has the bias and discrimination. We didn't touch upon it, but yeah, like what if a chatbot that's doing customer service is extremely biased to some people from a specific region, right? Like again, interpretability.
Yeah. Again, it depends on what the bias results in. Does it result in an exclusion? And exclusion in what sense? Exclusion in services. Maybe the services are not relevant. Maybe they find that their market study says that it's only this region or this demographic that will buy this service. So, actually, in that sense, AI is designed to filter out a lot and make things a lot more efficient. But of course, there will be biases that will come up in terms of opportunity. And those are the concerns that will have to be addressed at some point.
Yeah, I mean, today it's very mundane, like getting rejected for a loan, but then you'll say people, there are humans who also reject, have bias to reject someone for loan. So at
Absolutely.
that point, when someone tells me, oh, AI hallucinates, I'm like, humans also hallucinate all the time. Like, we just have
I
been
would actually, yeah. No, I would actually say that I'll be more comfortable if an AI exercises its judgment than a human, because human judgments are based on a number of other factors, and a lot of personal sort of biases come into play. And in
yeah.
AI, it's a combination of multiple personalities and their biases. So they will look at it a little bit more objectively than an individual.
Yeah, I agree. Which is, I spent time thinking about LLM as a judge instead of humans making the final decision on which content piece would do well on the internet. Let LLMs judge it.
Yes,
And that is a very fascinating concept.
I know. As long as it does not happen in my lifetime, I'm okay with it. Well, people of my I'm not saying people of my generation, but I think if we rely on machines to take critical, complex decisions in a complex country like India, from a judicial perspective, I mean, India it's not really a country. I consider India to be a continent. 28 different states, 55 languages, dialects, etc., cultural nuances, historical nuances that AI should not be deciding at this point of time or any time in the near future, right? And I'm not talking about the ethical issues that are there necessarily, but also the employment or the sort of taking over employment and things like that. But the fact is that the decision making and the judgment in these aspects of AI in a country like India, which is not by any measure of imagination a uniform country, is the right thing for the foreseeable future.
Got it. Fair point. Okay, any advice for founders starting off in a very complex AI algorithm environment right now?
It's a very exciting time to be a founder. There's a plenty of opportunity. I mean, it's like the gold rush. I would sort of compare the current AI wave with the gold rush of the 60s or the internet boom of the early 2000s. So I would say go out there, get creative, make sure that your imagination runs wild. But before you actually execute any of your imaginary plans, do take the proper advice and make sure that your guardrails are in place and your risks are mitigated so that you don't get into any kind of trouble. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.